Without any further ado, the VC is going to be doing the welcome, so I'm going to hand over to him.
Goedemiddag, Mweni. Hearty welcome to all of you colleagues. My name is Derek Swartz, and it's really a privilege for me to stand here to do a celebration, in fact, of an important day, which is in a sense closure to a project, but also hopefully the openings of a new stage in the evolution of an idea that I think will stay with us for some time. And I'd just like to welcome all my colleagues here. All of us are VIPs, and so I hope you're all going to feel quite welcome. Apologies for our new Vice Chancellor. I'm the stand-in guy now, They hire me on the cheap, She's unfortunately fortunately for her, on sabbatical. And unfortunately for me, because I was off today, I'm so sorry I'm dressed rather informally. I hope you don't see this as a slight of the occasion, that we take exceedingly with interest and importance going forward. But Dr. Mutwa sends her regards, and she would have otherwise been here to give you a sense of her vision for the future about how this project is going to evolve. A special thanks to Ilse, who's been, in a sense, the promoter, the steward of the institutional culture and living project, right from its genesis, right from the beginning as well, and took that mandate that was very rough and very broad, very hazy. Normally these are the ideas that come from one's mind, and she spun it and crystallized it in interesting ways that I could not have imagined at the beginning of the project. And as it evolved through different phases and iterations, of course, it became exceedingly more interesting as a kind of a reference point, a horizon, onto which we could then lock a range of things that we were thinking about doing in the transformation of the university, but did not have a platform to do so. But because at the end of the day, change and transformation, or adaptation, if you like, evolution or development for that matter, are quintessentially a human thing. It's about the human condition. It's not about the buildings or about the technology, about the material conditions per se. They relate to those objects in the environment. But in the end, you can have all that stuff. You can have a fancy new building, you can have great clothes, a car and all that, but your heart could be dark, filled with darkness, and your dreams could be, in a sense, soiled by nightmares, and you could not have perhaps reconciled yourself with the greater humanity and a sense of equality and compassion about the world. And so I think the project is, at the end of the day, it's about the human condition, about emancipating the human spirit and the human condition, and so that we can release all these incredible energies that are sitting in front of me that can shift the world to a different place. And institutional culture is essentially about, it's a reference point, a signifier, if you wish, of a range of things to do about what kind of organization, what kind of society, in fact, we want to be. And it marks in the sand a sort of a datum, a baseline where we think our university is at now, and it casts a light on where we want to take it to. We know that we are a microcosm of a society that is full of contradictions and inequalities and huge problems. And we know that the university cannot be free. It cannot be truly liberated from its own anomalies and contradictions unless society too is transformed. There used to be a famous, shall I say, Alan, saying in the 1970s, it's actually quite older than that, there can't be a normal sports in an abnormal society. You might have heard that phrase going around. Alan knows a great deal much more than me about the political history of the term, but I've always believed that you cannot have free and decolonized higher education, whatever we define that to be, without also having a society that is more equal, in fact. Of course, one should not jump from there to say that one should not have universities that are not free spaces. and spaces that are for public purposes and decolonize spaces until society is free, because the university can become an agent to foster and to promote social transformation in society as well. And so that I don't want to be misunderstood about that argument as well. But nonetheless, the signifier of institutional culture has opened up a vista, a horizon against which we could then dock a range of things that we want to do about the change, the transformation of the university. And to that extent, I think it's been an incredible project. And I want to thank not just Ilse, but the team that worked with her. I see a number of colleagues here. Some may not be here. I don't see Laura and the other colleagues, Denver, Lebogang. Of course, Professor Zinn is here. I know Professor Leach can't make it today as well. Alan Zinn, a number of colleagues. Herschela, I see here in the background. But all of you really played a role as we cascaded this idea down over several years into this amazing project, whose seminal ideas and experiences we wanted to capture in this little booklet that they have so beautifully compiled as a record, as an archive of what has happened as well. Human memory is notoriously, unreliable, isn't it? We forget so easily about the remote past. But we also forget just about, if you take myself, I often go into the kitchen and think, gosh, why the hell did I go here, Haven't you had those moments? No? Geez, you guys, look at you, all perfect specimens of the human condition, Anyway, well, I have a very dodgy memory, And it's important that we chronicle, we archive these moments and we write it down as a testament of what we have achieved and what we haven't achieved. And also as a way to pass on a set of written memories, if you wish, to the next generation, so to speak, so that they can pick up from where we've left off. And of course, we will only achieve a set of partial, very provisional and often quite precarious solutions, holding arrangements, but it's an ongoing, perpetual journey to make sure that we complete the process of creating a more humane, a more free, a more equal, a more inclusive, a more diverse society in a world in which all of us can have a place under the sun. And so that the next generation can take up that and do their own imperatives also. So to that extent, I am deeply appreciative of the efforts that you guys have done. When we started the project, it was just a very rough idea. And I'm a trained sociologist, although I consider myself these days as a punk sociologist, I have a PhD in it, but trust me, I'm just not current with all the latest theories and so on. But sociologists, for what it's worth, we are very skeptical of two things in general. The first is the possibilities and the limits of social engineering. We take a kind of agnostic view about that. We don't get too infatuated about the idea that society can simply be molded by a set of ideas. You might call it ideology or doctrine or whatever, and then everything will click into place, cause and effect. Human beings just don't react like that. And often, when you try to put human beings in a particular set of pigeonholes, then they react completely differently, or they surprise you in the way that they escape the categories in which you want to postulate them in, categorize or classify them in as well. And so there are inherent limitations, in my view, to seeing transformation or institutional culture change as an act of social engineering. If you see what I mean. That we can simply, in a kind of a cause-effect way, determine how people will come out of this process. Because you guys, me, all of us, are infinitely almost indeterminate and incomplete and constantly changing. Not just biologically, but also psychosocially, emotionally, and politically. Your ideas change all the time. So, what do I say about that as a sociologist? That does not mean, however, that because we are fearful of or careful about social engineering as a project, we should therefore not promote the idea of social change. Of course not. I think the idea of social change or transformation must be promoted as an open-ended, a discursive, a pluralistic project whose evolutionary trajectories and changes will always escape the categories in which we are trying to capture it each time in its evolution. So we would describe like non-racialism or democracy or non-sexism. All those categories change over time, and people take those categories and they make with them what they often want, and they construct their futures around that as well. And these are not neutral concepts too. They are inherent with lots of anomalies and contradictions, and if you put them all together, they struggle with each other. We usually say in the Constitution, we strive for a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, blah, blah, blah society, as if it's a logic of equivalence, that they simply can be strung together in a logically sequential way. But it doesn't work like that in practice too. So, in a sense, as a sociologist, I always have a sense that we should treat the notions of social transformation and institutional cultural change as a terrain for the contestation of different ideas about change. And hopefully through that emerges one that is truly and deeply democratic and pluralistic and inclusive and constantly vibrant and changing with the times that it confronts, because the challenges of the future will be very different from the ones that we've inherited now as well. So social engineering, perhaps not, but social transformation, absolutely yes, as well, and so understood as an open-ended project as well. And I guess the second point that I think as a sociologist I often worry about is the relationship between politics and if you like, scholarship, between the idea that politics reveals spaces that are often hidden by society. And it is an important function of society. I don't mean party politics guys like evicting Bob Mugabe or Jacob Zuma or whoever. That's maybe a part of it, but I'm talking about politics in the Greek sense of the word, about the polis, the public spaces that we all inhabit as well. And so politics, and particularly revolutionary politics or transformative politics, have the potency, the potential power to reveal spaces that are typically cracks in society that are plastered over by the people that manage society for the sake of stability or social cohesion, we call that, Denise. So politics has this thing of disrupting those things. It's like you're flying very high up in the air and you're coming very near the surface and you see, there are valleys and there are cracks, there are rivers and there are details that you haven't seen from very high up as well. So there is a utility to politics that is essential to social transformation. In other words, it's inherently political. You cannot depoliticize it. At the same time, I'm going to make the claim, I hope I can persuade you just for a minute, that politics both reveals the contradictions of society, but it also often obscures it in the way that it is prosecuted. Because the very categories that are generated by politics often become dogma. They become labels. We use transformation, and everybody else now is transformed just by declaring it. Everybody is freed by just saying uhuru. Everybody uses language in a way that, gives it no particular historical or contextual character or transformative potential. Things all stay the same despite the fact that we're mentioning all these names. You can hardly find a sexist or a homophobe or a racist or even a capitalist for that matter around these days as well. We are all sort of equal. So language is a political language has a obscured, effect often. If it is not subjected to rigorous, sometimes scholarly or analytical scrutiny as well, And therefore the link between politics and scholarship as well. There is a need for an alliance between, if you like, yourselves and the political movements that have been generating those kinds of convulsive political effects on our campus for the last 2 years as well. And there is an argument that for you to forge an alliance with the student movements on campus, with the labor movements on campus, with the gender movements on campus, with the youth movements on campus and off campus as well. So there's constantly an interplay and an interface and a kind of a reciprocal enrichment between the political moment, if you wish, that plays this role of revealing spaces, and an analytical moment which also gives those spaces clarity and create transformative, emerging properties out of those spaces where they are contested as well. Actually, I'm just making up these things as I'm speaking here. I was just sitting there. I didn't think about what I'm going to say now, But you're reminding me of my training, I used to be a good sociologist. I'm no more. So I'm going to keep it short, guys. All I would... Too late. Oh, my boss here says too late, So I would argue that there is a need for a progressive alliance between progressives, administrators, scholars, and so on in the university, and those student and worker and other movements as well. And each of them have a distinct role to play, but they also are important in helping each other to transform from its limitations. Because intellectual movements often become sterile. They become talking shops. We just endless conversations about transformation, nothing happens. And it takes political forces often to just come in and create chaos in that space as well. Often not in the right way, I admit it, but without politics, of contestation, of confronting the issues and naming them for that matter, simply doing theoretical and intellectual discussions would be insufficient for taking us the journey. Conversely, if you only have politics and you don't have theory, I'm looking at my SASCO group there, if you don't have theory, not that they don't have theory, Matiwani knows, he debates with me also about issues of transformation as well. But if politics without theory is dangerous and becomes directionless, and theory without politics is sterile. So you have to find a synthesis between these two. And I believe that the only way in which we can drive this project really is by grounding it in a progressive and an open-ended, a pluralistic alliance, if you like, between the political forces, if you like, and the scholarly work that we're doing on our university campus. And so I just want to leave you with that little kernel there. Just think about it. You don't have to take what I'm saying. The third thing I just want to say is that Dr. Mutua wants me to convey the message that she is going to be taking this project on in her office and drive it across a range of different platforms from next year onwards. And she'll speak, I can't speak on behalf of her on that, and she will be obviously, when she makes the inaugural speech next year, speak to this issue to the different constituencies. But I do know this rise right at the top of her own agenda as to what she wants to see happening at the university as well. So you're going to have a Vice-Chancellor that has a very strong organic commitment to changing not just the institutional culture, but changing the underlying conditions of existence, of living, of experience, of well-being of all on our university campus, so that when we use that term free university, we mean it not just in a material sense, but the freeing up of the human mind and the human spirit as well. And so to that extent, I am looking forward to, and I will definitely support the work that she will be doing with Prof. Zinn, Prof. Leach, and all the other colleagues, yourself, in this amazing journey going forward as well. I don't know how we will keep on to connecting with Ilse. I know you in that other country called the Western Cape. But maybe we can find some way to still draw on you're a real mensch. a real mensch, yeah, and a great heart, and a true non-racialist, and someone that is really courageous and helping us to confront the issues that we often don't want to talk about as well. And so Ilse, really from my side, I'm exceedingly grateful and deeply appreciative of your perseverance, and holding on there, not letting us off the hook, including myself, to focus on the moment, to focus on the momentum going forward. And I hope that you will continue to give us the benefit of your wisdom and your immense knowledge about this field. And I hope we can also produce a cadre, a group of young people in the system that can hopefully take up that responsibility going forward as well. I know you have a couple of guests. Ellen gave me a list here. Louis de Villiers, welcome to you, and Gunver Vellieu. I'm not so sure whether I'm pronouncing that at all. I'm so sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly. So without much further ado, I wish you very well on this journey, and I hope we will take this political moment and give it analytical content and meaning across the three missions of the university, in our curriculum, in our forms of engagement, our modalities of engagement, and of course in our research and innovation, so that we can harness the knowledge of the university to hopefully change the world. Thank you very much, colleagues.
I was told when we were having this process here that there's no need for an MC. so without any further ado.
I'm not used to this. I do a lot of talking for a living, but I'm not used to standing at a mic and looking at a congregation in front of me. So I told my workshop participants, because we literally finished our workshop half an hour ago upstairs, that I'm feeling incredibly nervous and sweaty palmed about this occasion. It is a beautiful moment, but I just want to acknowledge that we are in such a beautiful space, and I want to just acknowledge the art that's on the walls, and what the amazing So Mad team achieves and holds and represents in our institution. So I think can we give them a round of applause? If we talk about enlivening, there's a way in which the arts enlivens, and particularly the creative arts, visual arts, the music. And I really want to acknowledge that. And also, of course, this building is very historic in terms of its colonial origins. And so it's also an important moment to just hold that and to then reflect on how these spaces can be reclaimed and repurposed. I don't really like that kind of language. Reinterpreted, re-inhabited by other bodies that use them in other ways. And I'm very aware of all the art that gets made out here in those other buildings outside here, and really want to acknowledge the courage of all of those artists that often show us the way. So, as per usual, Derek, that speech was quite intense, and we're going to ponder it. I'm using the word P for pondering, because there were a couple of P's that Derek used that I think is really appropriate to the book. So my tension this afternoon has been speaking about the publication and not speaking about the project, about the process, because I've still got a lot to say about the process and where to from here. But we are fortunate that we're going into a reference group meeting straight after this. And in that space, we will do a little bit more of what you've tasked us to do, Derek. We'll do a little bit more of that. But for the purposes of this gathering, and for the sake of attention span of the people in the room, we're really just wanting to focus on the publication, with a P. So Derek spoke about things being partial, things being provisional, being precarious. Then he brought the politics in. Then he spoke about it being perpetual. I love that word, that perpetual. And then there was a word that he didn't use, but which to me summarized part of what he was trying to say, which is this idea of praxis, this idea of theory and then action in the world that is directed towards transformative, radical change. And so there's definitely a theme around the P's here that I want to hang on to. And this publication is partial. It is only one voice out of a range of voices, and it's provisional because we are engaging with new knowledges in this book. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of and most excited about, is that we are doing that stuff of generating new knowledges that are contextual and that are critical for our organizations going forward, wherever it is that we as Africans, we gather together to do the work that we need to do, these incredibly difficult challenges that we need to face. It's precarious. It is all very precarious. We had the image this morning in our workshop of pushing this trolley with all this baggage and all these suitcases, and then the top one falls out and all the dirty linen spills all over for everybody to see. This work is precarious. It is very political. I think if we can get everybody in our university community to accept and acknowledge that we are being political when we are not challenging the status quo, we're not being neutral, we are adopting a certain stance, a certain position. Okay. All right, so those are my introductory comments. I better get to my second card. All right, I'm on my second card. I only have so many, 3. I want to say that you may judge this book by its cover. So Kuda Kwashe sadly cannot be here. I know Alan is going to do a more formal sort of acknowledgement of him, but we had such a creative spark. I searched far and wide for a cover. I thought it was very important what the cover would be. And I wanted an NMU, Nelson Mandela University, art student to produce the work for the cover. I was absolutely dead set on that. And then I found Kuda's work on Humans of Port Elizabeth. Are you familiar with the Humans of New York thing? So he's done a thing on the Humans of Port Elizabeth, and I loved his work, and we had this very intense exchange for a good couple of days, and I'm so pleased with that cover, and it represents so many things to me, so I want to acknowledge Kuda in his absence. And then we also going, because this occasion is about the book, the publication. Alan, I'm technically not allowed to say thank you to anybody because Alan is doing the thanks, but I can't not acknowledge Nikki and Almin. Can you please stand up? So Nikki, the one with all the glasses, is the editor. Thank you so much. And Almin was the person who took Kuda's idea. We spoke, we had many long meetings, and we said we want to take the design elements of this beautiful cover and we want to work it into the text in a way that is enlivening. We can't have a boring book. We can't, because the whole project was about so much enlivening the space. And it's about hybridity, and it's about multiple texts, and it's about all kinds of creativity. And Almin, oh my goodness, and do these 2 women work? And they've got children, and they've got day jobs. And it was, for me, one of those experiences where I felt this doesn't happen often, I'm sad to say, panda moment for the participants of our previous workshop. It doesn't often happen that your expectations, are just completely beyond. How often does that happen? That something happens that is so wildly beyond your expectations. And what these 2 women managed to achieve was so wildly beyond my expectations. I am so grateful. It is such a beautiful, beautiful book. Thank you so much. And then I also want to acknowledge Brian, our poet, it's almost in residence, or poet laureate or whatever, of Port Elizabeth. Thank you so much, Brian, for the use of your poem at the beginning of the book. You'll see in the book that Brian's poem's there, and then there's a lot of Ben Okri also in the books, throughout the book. But Brian's poem is so meaningful to me because the thing that we can't forget is that the genesis of this work is in pain. It sits in pain. That is, we can engage with this book, with this process in political ways, in discursive ways, but it's the pain. it's the pain, it's the destruction of our humanity and of our sacred spaces in every which way of the word. I'm not just talking about churches. And it's our individual pain, but it's also our intergenerational pain. And so it was very meaningful for me, that poem, Brian. We used it every session that we had at the South End Museum. We would start with that poem, almost like a kind of a mantra, because it is so personal, it is so local about our space, the context, the space that we're in, and what we've lost, and an honoring of that pain. So I want to say thank you very much. Poets hold a lot of pain. Oh, it's a P word, poet. Yeah, and pain. There's definitely a P thing going on. So thank you so much for that. There were a few things I didn't know when this process started, and there were a few little things that I did know. The one thing I didn't know when we started this journey with Denise in 2009 at the Faculty of Education, I did not know that there would be this incredible 5-year journey that would follow on from that very powerful 18-month process. So one never knows what follows on. I did not know for the first 2.5 years or 3 years of the process, that was very hard. It was like whacking through a very, I almost said alien clearing. I didn't mean like that, but like it was really hard work. What I didn't know was that we were preparing the ground for Fees Must Fall, that we were cultivating readiness in the system, in the leadership, and in the sort of in many of the spaces of the system, to be able to meet this incredibly transformative event that came toward us from the future, which nobody really anticipated, and to meet it with certain core sort of skills and understandings around complexity and around courage and around conversations, a lot of C words. I also didn't know at the time that as we were closing out this project, we would be able to move out of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, the merger, that all that stuff that we had taken with us through that merger journey, and that we'd be able to step over this threshold. And it was very unexpected for me. I kind of thought it was a bit of a branding thing. And then at the launch and subsequently to that, the qualitative shift, this incredible threshold that we as an organization, as an institution have stepped over in terms of our new identity and the responsibility and the kind of, what it's calling forth from all of us. I didn't anticipate that. And it feels like this work has also been in readiness of the organization doing that. And then lastly, I didn't know that we were doing this work in order for Dr. M to come in and lead us on the next phase of our journey. We didn't know that at the time, all that grappling and work that we did together. And to me, there cannot be a more fitting closure. It is so beautiful, these different elements that have fallen into place. What I did know was that there was a thing called Vision 2020, and that it was one of the most radical, and I mean that in a very beautiful sense of the word, one of the most radical vision documents, a story, an idea of what a university could be and how it could be different. And I was completely compelled by Vision 2020. And I also knew that there was senior leadership who got the kind of complexity of this process that we would be embarking upon. I also knew that this university, situated in the Eastern Cape and with its own particular dynamics, was the most unique thing. And it's got to do with a principle called the law of the retarded lead, which I was introduced to by Sue Mertens, who's a futurist. And it's apparently an ecological and evolutionary principle that change never comes from the dominant position, from the place. It's very difficult to take institutions that are dominant in a particular era or epoch and kind of radically transform. You have to sort of be on the periphery, you've sort of got to be on the margins, you've sort of got to be kind of, not quite number 1, 2, or 3, in order to be able to have. She lists about 7 different criteria that makes it possible for this leapfrogging thing to happen. And I knew that Nelson Mandela University was special. I knew that. And it's been an amazing journey to be part of this leapfrogging of this university. And as many of you might know, we have just come out of a LB review process where UCT, which is one of the top 40 LLBs in the world, is at risk of losing their accreditation. And I have it on top authority that Nelson Mandela University was in the top 3 and had exceeded through this LLB review process had leapfrogged beyond many of these really established institutions. And a lot of it, apparently most of it had to do with the absolute commitment to transformation in all its different dimensions, but including the qualitative stuff, not just the quantitative stuff, and the success rates and the throughput rates and that kind of thing, but also the attention that had been given to the process around decolonizing the curriculum and working with different pedagogies and all that kind of stuff. And so so that has been a very important piece for me. And then the last thing that I knew was that we had to find a place somewhere where there was a group of people willing to step into this idea of what transformation practice, what does it look like in practice? Those of you who've been following debates on the Conversation Journal website, for example, and so on, will know that every single day of the week there's an article on transformation and how we should do it and we must do it and it's imperative to do it and who's not doing it. But how do we do it? What is the praxis part of it? It is very under-theorized and very under-explored. And that is the part that I'm really, really excited about in terms of this publication, because I think it makes a contribution to new knowledge. That's why I think it is so important, and I'm so grateful that we took the time, that all this pressure was on me to write up these reflections, and that we were able to actually put it out in this form, because it really is a contribution to new knowledges. There are a range of elements to the book, and I'm aware that I'm talking for quite a long time, that are all very significant. One of them is, in the book you will find both the original proposal, the 2012 proposal for this project, as well as you'll be able to read the entire text and see what we thought we were going to do and what were the underlying principles and how the process itself unfolded. And I'm hoping that when you read that, you will connect with this idea of emergence and of working with complexity and working with living systems, because transformation is a complex journey, and we often miss that part because we are stuck in paradigms that can't really make that happen. You will also find the different kinds of texts. So we wrote these texts, these contributions to the Nelson Mandela, to the Talk newsletter at the time when stuff was happening. And then there's also the text that runs through, which is like now a kind of a backward-looking voice. There are also all these artifact elements, like there's the pictures that depict the different methodologies and social technologies that we used, and the poems, the proverbs, all of these things, these different texts. And then, my second last point, there is the very extended acknowledgements. Any of you that have looked through the book will see, I think Nikki went, oh my goodness, I don't think there's ever been a book with a 7-page acknowledgements. Now, this was done very intentionally. It was done intentionally because on the one hand, it's to show the involvement of so many people on so many different levels in a process like that. So it's to kind of map and scope that. But it's also this principle of acknowledgement and appreciative inquiry and gratitude. I really wanted to make that point. It's a theoretical point. And so there is a long list of acknowledgements, and that is a good thing for you guys because it means the speech can be shorter, because I don't have to go and now thank everybody that I've thanked in black and white in those acknowledgement pages. 2 things left to say. The one is that one of my personal, from speaking personally, David White is a corporate poet. He does poetry in corporate spaces. I know the poetry thing has always been a thing with the ISE process. But he says this. He says, soul has to do with the way human beings belong to their world, their work, or their human community. And where there is a little sense of belonging, there's little sense of soul. It seems to me, he says, that human beings are always desperate to belong to something larger than themselves. And when they do not feel this belonging, they not only feel as if they're running on the spot, they quite often feel as if they're dying. Without belonging, there is no attempt to coerce enthusiasm or imagination from us can be sustained for very long. And I want to say that this is my gratitude, is that my own personal history is one of not belonging. And I found in this institution a place of belonging. And that is why I was able to sustain this enthusiasm and my contribution to the imaginative dimensions of this process for so long, because I feel such a great sense of belonging to this institution, for which I'm very grateful. Last thing, this job started with me having to interpret Derek's very quick, as he said, rough kind of brief. And so I want to end it. I want there to be some symmetry. So I want to end it with me once again interpreting Derek's words. And so at the launch, I hope you're going to not be upset about this or pleased or whatever, but at the launch in July, Derek made some off-the-cuff welcoming remarks, which, as you can imagine, went on for a little while and was incredibly powerful in this kind of off-the-cuff way. He was just supposed to say welcome, but he made this whole speech, as he did today, and it really was incredible. And I was sitting there, and I was just literally capturing phrases, just capturing the phrases as he was speaking. And I've crafted that into what we call a found poem. So you take somebody's words, and then you craft it into a poem format. So these are Derek's words, given back to him now and to us as a community. The last two lines are not his. They are from, or the last three lines came from the occasion itself. And so this is how I'd like to end. And it goes like this. This moment, a positive embrace, animated from within. Not just new labels, not pouring old wine into new bottles, but a moment to animate the vision and values of Tata Madiba all around us. Sprawling, impoverished communities, all the contradictions of our time, this paradox, our university, the epitome of progress, just a stone's throw away, sprawling townships, trapped and mired. What then is the function of knowledge? As a testament to our commitment, at the end of the day, at its essence, you need to solve the problems out there, the quintessential challenge of our time. All this paraphernalia of science, the most sophisticated molecular microscope on the entire continent. We can look into the inner recesses of an atom, see the smallest objects in the universe, which we are all made of, contribute to the SKA, looking back and deep into the cosmos and the past 13 billion years, but we cannot solve the bucket system. Can't provide housing, jobs. This has something to do with capitalism. Like a thorn, the law of unequal and contradictory development. Dikhang and others reading Marx on the island. We have adopted humanizing and liberatory practices and pedagogies to free us from these contradictions. This will be the litmus test, whether we have lived up to our new name. We have spent the last 10 years creating the conditions and institutional culture to embrace this moment. May our choices reflect our hopes and not our fears. We are the masters of our fate, the captains of our soul. Thank you.
So, Ilse, thank you so much. I'm also conscious that we have some other visitors who are peeping in. I see Biko, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. Have you noticed? They're over there. And we're in this interesting space where, as you were speaking, like I'm looking out there and thinking, well, okay, what are they thinking about what's happening here? But I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think being in this space here, we in a university space, a pre-colonial, colonial, whatever, but we're remaking it. This is in a sense, as the VC said, it's a celebration. It's not a conventional book launch, which we would normally get a colleague from another university to come and etc. come and speak. That we probably will do ILSA, because we will have many variations on the theme. But for us today in-house, we have our DVC, Teaching and Learning, and I welcome her to the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Molweni. It is good to be here. So, Deepening the Conversations by Ilse Alkers, a response. As fascinated by, and I just need to say before we started, I had to write this down because I can't trust myself like the VC can to just walk from there to here and have the whole speech in my head. So I had to write this down in the middle of the night. So I'm going to be reading most of it. So as fascinated by words and their significance, as Ilse is by numbers and their significance, I thought about the word response. What are its roots? Where does it come from, this word? I found out that in Latin and Old French, it means something offered in return. The root of the word is spons or spond and means a pledge or covenant. So to respond, said one dictionary, is to answer in kind. It is to re-pledge. And this is what I've set out to do as respondent today, to re-pledge. In my response also, I'm conscious of the literary concept of point of view. Both the authors and my own, I'm going to refer to you as the author today, Ilse, and my own, and that of others who were part of this institutional culture enlivening process. ICEP, or the project that is the subject of the book. In other words, Ilse, I plan to take a multi-perspectival point of view in my response. This has become a little in-house joke between Ilse and I actually found out that it's a word that goes back to Calvinist roots. But we look at that. So I'm going to first of all give a perspective on the beginning. It's a day in September, the 9th month of the year, in 2009. It is spring. There are pink and white blossoms and luminous new green leaves and shoots on the trees. The air is crisp and fresh, interlaced with the exhaust fumes and smog that is Cape Town. We are to meet in a coffee shop close to the precinct of the Children's Hospital in Rondebosch or Mowbray. We haven't met before, but I know of her. Highly recommended by my sister as the best facilitator she has ever worked with, and who has been in partnership with her in a consultancy called Embrace that focuses on race work. She wears a dark green wraparound dress over cropped pants that I come to know over the years as Ilse's particular style. We discussed the purpose of our meeting, how to work with, unearth, build and grow an organization into something real, purposeful, meaningful, doing deep work. To get beneath the pseudo-civility, the beleefdheid, the polite veneer that is the tenuous fragility holding together the structure and functions of the Faculty of Education at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. It is clear from this first meeting that we are on the same page. Not knowing me or the project or how it will unfold, Her conviction is that the process will reveal and deliver what it must. And a project that is a process is born. As we leave, she hands me an envelope with a gift that I turn to time and time again. I do so still, to this day. And I've had occasion to return it to her in recent times. I return to it to her again as I start my response. It is a way of working the meaning of the word response, returning a pledge in kind. Expect nothing. Live frugally on surprise. Become a stranger to need of pity. Or, if compassion be freely given out, take only enough. Stop short of urge to plead, then purge away the need. Wish for nothing larger than your own small heart, or greater than a star. Tame wild disappointment with caress unmoved and cold. Make of it a parka for your soul. Discover the reason why so tiny human midget exists at all. So scared, unwise, but expect nothing. Live frugally on surprise. It is a poem by Alice Walker that helps put things in perspective in this work we do, in this one lifetime we get to live. It has become for me a key perspective in a multi-perspectival approach to living a meaningful, purposeful life. And now for another perspective. Because as always, as the VC has said so eloquently, the paradoxes come to the fore when one does deep work. The first of these is that despite the advice to live frugally on surprise in the poem, the surprises on this shared journey are bountiful. The work we did together in the beginning made reference to, in various parts of the book, Deepening the Conversations, describes how this project came into being. Ilse writes about the foundations and also the first experience of the experiment that was working with the institutional culture of an organization, in this case a substructure within the larger structure that is the university. It was the inner whirl, spelled W-H-O-R-L, perhaps the heart of the fractal that was to become the recurring design that became ICEPT. Surprise, surprise. The book is unapologetically Ilse's perspective, a story of the institutional culture enlivening process that unfolded like a fractal, a spiral that is as much a part of her life's journey as it has been ours. In the intersection of these various spirals that are our own individual stories and lives, there are moments of great learning, deep insights, great turmoil, deep questioning, great joy, deep satisfaction, great moments of knowing, deep moments of depression, spiraling out, spiraling back in, like in a dance. One of the texts often used by Ilse to guide some of this work was the Donella Meadows' Dancing with Systems. So perhaps it is no surprise that the work felt like a dance. And as the African proverb goes, when the music changes, so does the dance. And how the music has changed. Often. Which leads me to some other perspectives. The complexity of the multiple perspectives from which to understand what exactly institutional culture is forms the focus of chapter 2 of the book. It provides Ilse's reflections on grappling with these perspectives as part of responding to the purpose of the project, which was to transform and build our institutional culture at Nelson Mandela University. Her reflections on the multiple perspectives that abound in the literature on this subject, the engagement with these in several processes and workshops, with multiple groups of participants, with insights provided from all positions and layers in the institution, from the VC to those of academics, those in institutional support, those working in technical positions and on the grounds and gardens. Perhaps land in the subheading on page 54, which is Institutional Culture as Living Curriculum. Throughout the book, as in any curriculum, in its broadest sense, we are reminded of the ways in which this view of institutional culture as living curriculum have come to life through the design of the project and its processes. As much as the point of view of the book is decisively Ilse's, so is the design of the book, which mirrors the design of the processes themselves, and she spoke a little bit to that. So interspersed with her perspectives are the cartoons that acted as thought stimuli. You will all remember the famous Lunig and Zapiro and others. The African proverbs that both thematically grounded and guided the focus of various sessions. Most significantly, of course, is the Ben Akri poem, Mental Flight, from which she started or ended many a process that runs like a riff, a golden motif through the book. In so many ways, the way the book unfolds gives us glimpses into Ilse's mindset, the mindset of a living systems curriculum designer. And as in the extract from Akri in chapter 2, we are aware of how these proverbs, quote, whisper modest maxims as thought friends for a new age. To Ilse, and also to those of us who participated in the various processes, and now to us as readers of the Book of Practice Reflections. In chapter 3, she focuses on what she calls our theory of change. I'm struck here by the shift from the point of view of the author, in the first person, in the first 2 chapters, to the assumption of the collective perspective, as cued by the collective possessive our theory of change. And I've asked myself to what extent this theory of change was indeed embraced by the collective. As the conversations deepened and the streams of work multiplied, how did the patterns unfold? Did the spirals neatly whirl around into a cohesive whole, or did they unravel and fragment? I was aware during the second phase of the project the many different reactions and responses to the process. Many participants, some at first reluctant and resistant, became caught up in the dance and started enjoying its energy, its ability to reconnect them with themselves, their own vulnerabilities, and that of others, their individual and collective histories, their sense of purpose, their connection to the university, to these common spaces, to our university's vision and mission. Others resisted. Whole divisions in the university resisted. Some senior leaders resisted. Many individuals and groups resisted and refused to participate. Some were indignant that they felt obligated to participate. One scientist expressed outrage that he felt, quote, forced to write a poem. You all know who I'm talking about. I mean, some of you know who I'm talking about. Several felt that facing and sharing vulnerabilities was too much to ask. I found it perhaps significant, too, that the authors of the several poems written by participants are not named. I know there's probably a reason for this, but they are thus invisible. I know that there are these practical reasons, but there it is. Many voices, evidence of their participation, but who are they? And where are they? We need to know them. They are part of the collective that need to take this journey forward, whose perspectives need to have a human face. As the music plays on, I ponder, different people dance, or don't, to different beats, hear different sounds, different melodies, different harmonies, different discords. They always say, and excuse me, I'm not being racist here, white people can't dance. It's not true. They hear a different beat. That's what it is. They all exist. All are real, if we listen and watch closely. So as the point of the view of the author shifts from the first-person narrative to the assumption of a collective shared position, I find my own response is perhaps one of surprise. And then the music changes again. There's an opening drum roll of outrage at the end of 2015 that heralds the mounting percussion of countrywide protest that has the energy and fury of the dance of the whirling dervishes, spiraling round and round and round in a way that never seemed to end. I'm talking about you, students. But it also signaled the beginning of the end. And so in chapter 4, the author reflects on the ICEP as a factor and a foundation, as a witness and a participant in all that has led to the emergence of this moment in our history that was and is the Fees Must Fall movement, and comes into the fullness of its being in 2016, 40 years after June 1976. With a fascination with numerology and astrology, I know Ilse must be seeing significance in all these numbers, these cycles. I found this chapter perhaps one of the most fascinating in the book. I'm talking about chapter 4, as the author makes sense of this moment and what has led to its emergence. Were we cultivating readiness for Fees Must Fall in ICEP? I'm not sure the answer to that question, but we were forced to dance to this new music as a reality. And in many ways, the living curriculum, the transformation of the curriculum that is the institutional culture, so named by Ilse at the beginning of this journey, was upon us. There was no avoiding it. During this time, all the processes planned for the continuation of the ICEP journey stopped. They couldn't take place. Ilse had the opportunity as both an insider but also an outsider, as the VC said, in that country called the Western Cape, to make sense of what was happening at Nelson Mandela University as well as at other universities around the country. For us, immersed in it, it was a lived experience that affected us physically, mentally, emotionally, and it was hard to be both observers and participants. And so our perspectives, a point of view in this chapter deepens the conversation with us, still, as readers, forcing us to consider what has happened as audience as well as players. In one of the regular pieces included in the book, which was written for talk, she asks, how do we listen to and engage with students when they become disruptive, abusive, and even violent? And yet, we empathetically understand their frustrations and impatience. How can we act with clarity and conviction as teachers, leaders, and managers from a place of eldership, stewardship, and wisdom, and at the same time recognize that students hold the key to the future that we, older generation, cannot grasp? Drawing on Donella Meadows' dance analogy, she concludes by suggesting to us that we try to move with the new energy and momentum that is sweeping through our campuses and our sector. She invokes our espoused philosophy of a humanizing pedagogy to point out that this moment in our history is about a vibrant, stimulating, and richly diverse environment, about diverse knowledge traditions, about transformational leadership, about ethical knowledge, about knowledge for the liberation of the human condition from all forms of discrimination and injustice. This, she says, is about our Nelson Mandela University, our Vision 2020 for tomorrow, today. We are left with a question to ponder. Did ICEP cultivate a readiness for this moment, this period in higher education? She outlines the ways she thinks it has done so, and we need to reflect on this ourselves. This brave, groundbreaking, innovative experiment, the higher education sector has not seen one like it, commissioned and underwritten by our visionary Vice-Chancellor, Derek Swartz. You can hear from his introduction at the beginning the propensity that he has for this kind of experimentation, believing that nothing is linear, that nothing can be fixed, and that there is room for this kind of open-endedness, openness to change. We need to continue to question to what extent we have embraced the theory of change Ilse claims as ours at NMU. And if it is, how do we engage with our living curriculum? A glaring missing perspective in this work that has been ISEP in the journey are the missing passengers that are our students. The students have come in from time to time as invited guests on the journey, but their numbers have been few. It is time we embrace, on the journey going forward, their own injunction: nothing for us without us. To conclude then, the fifth and last chapter begins with Ilse reflecting on the necessity of tracking change and experimenting not just with embracing a paradigm shift to complexity thinking, but also to experimenting with tracking change from a complexity perspective. The importance of this for ongoing learning, Ilse states, is, to quote her, creating opportunities for more effective feedback loops into the system. This book, written in the form of practice reflections, has started that feedback loop for us in the journey that tracks the changes as we go, and needs to continue in our university. It is something I hope we will take up, this challenge, under the leadership of our new VC, Dr. Mutwa, who never shies away from a challenge. And this is perhaps a critical one in this important time of change in the history of higher education in our country and indeed the world at this juncture in the 21st century. In this chapter, Ilse provides some pointers and some references to consult and invite into our thinking as we undertake this task. As I conclude, I do so feeling that perhaps I can actually respond with a tentative answer to the implicit question in chapter 4 about whether these past 5 years of ISEP, and for me the past 8 years of being involved in this work with you, Ilse, have we been cultivating readiness for what faces us? My tentative answer is yes, I think we have been doing that. We can never be completely ready. But as expressed by our foundation phase student, Ntombibongo Peteni, whom I don't see here today, but whose poem has become my favorite, entitled Curriculum, written on one of the teaching and learning retreats in this space. She says, and there's an obliqueness to this, Ilse, to use your word, that is also about you. I have become you. If you must question me, you need to be the answer. If you want me dead, you need to die. You need to shed. You need to sit in the sun and soak back the color I have drained from you. Are you prepared for that? To live a life without me? But I am all you know. Look, you are standing on a cliff, on the edge of a cliff. Are you prepared to jump? And jump we must. A leap of faith into a future that will both push and pull us forward. The many challenges Ilse puts to us in this book, how much or how little we read, how much or how little we listen, we observe, we think, we change, what we have become complacent about, how we conduct meetings. Faroon, are you here, Faroon? You must read that part of the book. He was here a bit earlier. Whose knowledges we teach and embrace or reject and criticize, and why these challenges are the cliffs on which we stand. Where and how we land will depend on how prepared we are, what we have put in place to support us, our agility, our fitness, our softness, our humility, our willingness to fail, and our willingness to try to fly. Thank you, Ilse, for being willing to make the jump, to take us on this journey with us, to be a co-pilot, a pilot, a passenger, a steward, a mopper-upper of flight sickness, accompanying us through turbulence, also for helping us to land, sometimes on rough ground, with bumps and bruises. Right, Eva? Sometimes in hot water, or in wonderful moments just smoothly gliding to stillness. Always, however, you have managed to put the music back on and encouraged us to keep dancing. We have enjoyed the dance, with you taking the lead facilitator.
We're now going to move into kind of closure and thanks, but if it's a burning question, most of us here haven't read the book, I'm assuming, yet. So we need to have a deeper dialogue on the book, Ilse, which I'm sure is going to happen. But just in case there's a burning question or comment before we move into the thanks. Going, gone. Right. Oh, you want to say something, Ilse? No? Okay. All right. Then it just falls to me to say thank you to people on behalf of ISEP, Ilse, the teams, etc. And I'm going to ask these three people to stand, the external facilitators, Sharon, Nyaka, Hannah Kotza. The two of them are from Port Elizabeth, and Desiree is from Cape Town. And these were the senior... Am I getting it wrong? Oh, okay. They were the three senior people who worked with Ilse, and there were a few others, but I think these were ones really holding the process, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to continue doing work with you going forward. So thank you so much for staying the course despite the ups and downs and the turbulence that has actually been referred to. Thanks a lot. Ilse, you've thanked Kudu, who's not here at the moment, and so I think yes, just to let people know that the person who did the designing is a senior designer at Forever Friday. I like that one, eh? Yeah. Forever Friday, a branding, marketing, and events sort of company. There's some food for thought, not only real food at the back over there, but some of Kuda Wash's work is actually up on the wall as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about the person, I really like his stuff on the hip-hop culture and identity that he has up on the wall there. So then Almin and Nikki have of course been thanked already, but we'll thank them again, and thanks so much for this fantastic quality in-house book. So VC, I have a question to pose to you. When are we getting our the Mandela publishing house? Yes. Yeah. You see?
Dr. M is in charge now.
Right. So, yeah. So, why I was going there was that Harshila Riga, who needs to be thanked over there, and I'm going to say thank you to Kamlesh for coming out, because people work in the background, giving space and time to other people in families. And so Harshila, in a previous life, she was a person who worked for the Natal Press. Was it called the Natal? Yeah, the University Press. And I was thinking that we actually have a lot of people in-house who actually have quite a bit of a skill sort of sets that will be able to help us. But Harshila, I think that just to go back one, Claire, who's sitting, where is Claire? Is she here at the back? So Claire started as the first admin person in the process. Then she got poached by the Office of International Education. It happens. And I'm hoping that she's quite happy. She's happy there. But to say thank you to you for the startup of the process, and getting the files going and etc. And then Harshila has come, and I just had to ask her, I thought it was like a year or two, and it's 3.5 years that have passed. So it's a good while. And a person who comes in with a great level of skill sets in work that is happening across the campuses and the provinces. There's a process that will happen at the end of this month for 3 days in George, in the campus in George, and Ilse and Tabang are going to be the facilitators there. And so she's having to do this sort of remote organizing without people. But I think this has been great to have really competent administrators and more than that. So a huge thank you to you, Ashila. I'm assuming that Ilse will be doing another more intimate thanks and gifts and that kind of thing. Derenique, the go-to intern, who's sitting over there. And I'm glad that Derek, you could make it. I know that you had to be the transport guy in mornings, late afternoons, etc. And Derenique, thank you for your work. And I do understand that you're going to be continue to do some admin work with the incoming chair in critical studies in higher education transformation. So that word transformation is coming in many spaces. Yes, so we'll be seeing you, and I think you are completing your marketing communications degree next year. So yeah, okay. My co-conspirator Heather Nell, we had to kind of see to the administrative management things, and Heather had other duties going to Manco and presenting at that level. And thank you for that, and thank you for doing the oversight in 2016 when I was away for a while. I think that all the different hands and the sections worked very well together. Yeah. So then, you can't do any of this work without a whole set of people, service sort of providers, etc. I'm not going to name them all, but over the number of years, there are all kinds of people who are called on at short notice. And so we just want to place on record our thanks to them in various ways. And now, of course, last but not least, we give thanks to Ilse, who committed herself so completely, as we heard, functioning across divides, bi-monthly flights, suffering with the capture, the state capture of the SAA. When flights get cancelled, flights get delayed. I'm sure in the last 5 years you can write a little study, So yeah, and so it's been a while, because there was education first, and now 5 years of this ISEP and this migrant labor system and that. But thank you for that. So there are two sets of gifts. So the one is more. I'm a concrete person, eh? So. The one set of gift is from Canrad, and I'm going to call Anson Wabo to come and hand it over in a minute. But it's a process. It gives you a little taste of course, the transitioning that happened. And so I'll tell a story. VCU had probably one. They say there's a strategic retreat in politics, and I recall that you had sent out this notice about, parking and spaces, only to find, backtrack here, the forces are too strong. I thought there was going to be some area where I had to backtrack, but maybe, not yet. So we start off when I came in. And I met with marketing people. I said, "Oh, but it's so blue. Everything is so blue. The whatever." Because I was coming, of course, with that logo, which actually went through quite a process. So, Ilse, you've got the deep blue, and maybe we were in the blue as well at that time. And then you have a much more interesting sort of development, when you have the color starts coming in, and you have this medium transitioning starting there, and then you come to the phase now, and you go from the rectangular to the round. So hopefully you'll be able to use this. So Marvel, will you come forward, please? You're going to hand it over. Thanks. So I'm going to give you that one because this is now the latest. This is the latest one. You can hand that one to Ilse. Okay. Okay, colleagues, and so we have the main gift, and we say thanks to David Jones at the back there, the HOD of So Mad, and that team there, Mary's in the team and others, and they then activated this gift, and so I'm going to call on Vulandlela. There he is. Okay, will you please come forward, and he's going to explain the making of the gift to us, and then we'll bring it out.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, VC, DVC. I won't keep you long. I just have to explain the processes that we went by. I am Vulandlela Nyoni, and I am a printmaking lecturer in the visual arts department, and many people will say, what is printmaking? But I will explain in a few moments. The gift that we have for you, Ilse, is a very significant one. A few weeks ago, as we all know, our university was rocked by an attack on two of our constituents, and that was on 2nd Avenue. And unfortunately, those students were part of our faculty. And I believe that the university as a whole will continue to feel the after effects of such a heinous crime, and more so be made aware of the daily misdeeds committed against women and children all the way through. And I, at the time, was teaching a second-year class in printmaking. We were doing a monotype project, and again, you'll ask, what is that? But I'll explain in a few moments. And at the time, I had a class of 16 young women and one male, and myself as their lecturer. And I was very much struck by the role in which education and participation needs to sort of shift. And I walked into the class on that the morning after, and unbeknownst to me, I had already started to use a social technology, and I got everyone in a circle. I didn't have bells, but we dismantled our reactions to what was going on. We questioned our sense of accountability for the event that had happened. And through that conversation, a direct conversation with students and ourselves, and we went around individually, just really having courageous conversations about what it was. We arrived at a point at which we elected to create icons. And an icon is something that you would ordinarily take and put it on a mantelpiece or put it in your bag, or it's like a paper prayer. It's a symbol of something, religious iconography, for instance. And the students came upon themselves to create a series of icons that would bring about messages of positivity, mostly to do with love, resilience, strength, and hope. And together, I took part. We created these icons that would be then printed onto one piece of paper using a lino cut technique. I'll just give you a technical lesson here at the moment. Lino cut is very significant within South African history in that it was lino cut that was taught at Rorke's to black artists who were given the first opportunity to have a creative voice in the art world. So we're talking about John Mafengeo, Azari Mbata, Lionel Davis. And lino cut is a very humbling material. We use it on the ground. It's a flooring process. It's a flooring material. You stand on it. It's grounding. And so what we then did was take out our lino cutting and using a technique which is to engrave our experiences onto this lino cut, came up with these icons. And we then collaborated to print them all onto one piece of paper, one print. So as an act of support for our survivors of violence, we editioned these prints 7 times. 2 of those prints will go to our survivors. Each one of them, the survivors will get one, as a symbol of our institutional support for their healing and their journey through what they have to go through. The rest of the prints are for sale, and the proceeds from those sales will go to a local survivors of violence charity that we're going to identify. And I think that's really just coming back to the space that we find ourselves in and the processes that we've gone through for the last few weeks. I've recently arrived, and I'm still reeling from just being immersed in this process, and I'm going to go forward courageously with the process of transformation in the way that I teach. But I'm speaking for my colleagues here, Mary and David at the back. We're very much always honored for everyone to participate in events like this in a space that is about visual culture, because I think that in some ways the visual culture that we experience in our daily lives is a key to transforming the way that we respond to ourselves as human beings and other people too. And I think that's all I have to say.
So Ilse, it's yours. This is yours to come forward. Yeah? Okay, colleagues, I think we've come eventually to closure. Just to say that the book is going to be available online, open to access to all students and staff from tomorrow. Zandila, you're going to help us with that. Put it out there onto the sites, and yes, we're wanting people to read. We're wanting people to, to reflect and to come back into the new year and to challenge us around what we're doing right or wrong or whatever. Just to say, overall, thanks to everybody for all the different roles that you played. We've got people sitting here who are facilitators. We've got people who are aspirant ones, people who've gone through the immersion. We've got student leaders who are really going to have to help us to hold things through a turbulent sort of time that we are in. And I think, as the speakers have said, we're going to need to figure out how are we going to work together and yet be sort of challenged in this period. Ilse, lastly, to you, anything else? Otherwise, I can declare things closed, and there's some eats and stuff on the other side. Thank you very much.